Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's main event. Representing SNAZZY FX with 5 new modules to present, a man who will bring chaos to the masses, a man who believes in trash. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Snazelle.
Hello. You gonna come out here? All right, so I got some new stuff tonight. Oh. All right, I thought I would start by just showing some stuff, and then I'll talk about some stuff, if that's okay. So tonight we have 2 rows, and the bottom row is almost all the new stuff and some of the old stuff. And you know what? Maybe I should just get rid of this patch. What do you think? Should I just get rid of the patch and start over?
Yes.
All right, let's just get rid of the patch. All right. All right, so we're going to start just going through one at a time what the modules do, and then we'll get back to what we had. So the new modules, if you can see, oh wow, are these right here. The eternal spring filter, the kitty eyes, the high gain, the dual multiplier, and the kick me. So we're going to start with the high gain, which is 3 voltage controlled discrete gain cells. And so we'll just start with, 1 second. All right, so we're just going to start with a regular drum sound. And I'm going to show you what that drum sound sounds like unprocessed. Okay. So let's take that sound, which is coming from the Pico drums, the Erica Synth Pico drums. Now we're going to put that instead through the high gain. The way that the high gain works is you have 3 channels of basically voltage controlled overdrive. And the top 2 channels can work as VCAs, and the bottom channel is just an additional gain stage. If you come out of the sum out, you automatically pass through all 3 channels. So the way that I most often use it is by plugging into channel 1 and coming out of sum out. And then you get parallel processing through 3 channels. And each of the 3 cells is a different design. So they all have a different tonal characteristic to them. So that's the sound that we were hearing before. And you can really mess up the sound a lot. And that's without even really doing much as far as patching it. Now if we start patching a bit, a fun trick to do with it is to cross-couple the cells. So we're going to take the out of cell 1 into the CV in of cell 3, and the out of cell 3 into the CV in of cell 1. And that's pretty nice. And I wanted to make a module that could get sounds like that within the modular without having to add a distortion box or anything like that. And there's a lot of ways that you can use it. Like you could use the top cell as a VCA first before it went into the distortion. But let's say we wanted a hi-hat. Well, it's hard to tell what anything is now. 1 second. And while that's going, we're also going to patch in another new module, which is the kick me, which is our kick drum module. So now I'm going to take, and I'm pretty much just going to talk about these modules as I start patching them in. So if it seems confusing, just deal with it. We're going to next look at the eternal spring filter, which is a filter that's kind of a weird topology, but it also has a lot of saturation on it, on the input and the output. So if you use it in conjunction with the high gain, you can really get some messed up sounds. So we're going to first take that same sound and go into the filter first, then into the high gain. And then, because the high gain has so many inputs and outputs, we're going to take one of the outputs and feed it into the CV in of the filter for some feedback. That's kind of nice. And there's still more CVNs, so we could, let's see. Well, another fun thing to do is to get the kitty eyes involved. And the kitty eyes is our newest chaos module. And it's much smaller and cheaper than the older ones, but it has some of the same functionality. So let's say that we take one of the outputs from the kitty eye, or from the high gain, put it into the CV in of the kitty eyes, and then take one of the outputs from the kitty eyes and plug that into the filter. Or into the CV in. So that right there is kind of what I was going for, is being able to get some of these kind of sounds within Eurorack very easily. That sounds pretty nice, I think. So let's now maybe get another sound on top of that. So the Dual Multiplier is another of our new modules, and it's just two very high quality multipliers that you can use for a lot of different things. 4-quadrant VCAing, you can use them for, with a summer you could do frequency shifting, you can do ring modulation, you can do analog computing. So we're just going to use it for something very simple. We'll take an output of the drone bank, and then another output of the drone bank. And the top multiplier normals into the bottom, so it's very easy to take a sound and ring mod it or multiply it with something else, and then have it drop down into the bottom section where you can VCA it. So it's good for making nice spectral sounds that you can easily control. So I'm going to take a trigger signal from the sequencer and put that into an envelope. And I'm going to feed that to the bottom section. And then we'll just turn that up with the rest. See what we get. Now those are both triangle waves that we're modulating, so if we were to give it something with more harmonics, we'll take the output of the VCOB. We'll take a sawtooth wave and, a higher frequency sawtooth. Now these multipliers can take pretty high frequency signals, well above what you can hear. And the sidebands created from them can go into the high range as well. It's a very clean multiplier. Okay, so now I'm going to show you one fun thing to do with the dual multiplier is instead of using just a constant tone as the first signal, we could use a sample. And let's see what samples we have in here. Let's see here. That was actually still the high gain. One moment. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Let me find the sample first. It works especially well with vocal samples. So let me find a good sample. well, that might work. So let's try that. We'll put that in there. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to trigger that sample.
Dan, what is it going into?
The dual multiplier.
What is the dual multiplier?
It's two multipliers. And a
Which multiplier?
What's that?
Which multiplier?
It's based on the 8633, which is a really nice analog devices multiplier chip. And it's just a very simple utility multiplier. I mean, it's a 4-quadrant multiplier. I mean, like analog computers, for example, were basically just multipliers, summers, adders, and integrators. So it just allows you to get one step closer to analog computing. But a ring modulator is basically a multiplier. I mean, it's also a type of a switching circuit. But the classic ring mod sound is easy to make with a multiplier. But you can make a lot of other sounds with them as well. And it's also great as VCAs. It's a very clean VCA, and you get 2 of them. It's a good module to experiment with and to try stuff with, because it can do things that other modules can't. Hold on one second. Let me just... Okay, so now... Let me make that a little louder. And now if we come out of the bottom section, it's now multiplied with another signal. So we could add a... Unfortunately, I forgot to bring the right mini SD card full of vocal samples, so this isn't exciting as I hoped it would be. But we'll use it in some other patches as well, but it sounds good. You can play with it next door. But
it's not unlike the surge wave multipliers, right?
It's completely different. No, that's a wave multiplier. A wave multiplier or a wave folder is a... A multiplier is really just like what you have in math, x times y or a times b. It really is, it's an analog multiplier. So what it allows you to do is literally multiply one analog signal by another, okay?
Oh, okay.
And it's 4 quadrants, so it gets, negative and positive if it's centered around DC. So it's great right now we've just been putting signals that are constant, a constant drone, a constant drone, so it's not super exciting, but it's really neat for creating soundscapes, and because there's 2 of them normaled into each other, you can have the top one doing, ring modulation, which then normals into the bottom. So basically, the product of the top section, so x times y, normals into the bottom, and then you can multiply that with something else. So in a pinch, you can easily take a VCO, multiply it with 2 signals very quickly to get something that's moving and shifting. Like if you put 2 LFOs into it, it's just a nice way to add movement to a signal, or it works with DC as well. So you can put multiple DC sources into it and multiply those together. It's a pretty nerdy module. It's not something that's, doesn't just make a sound on its own, and it does take a bit of experimentation, but it's really easy to get results out of. It was just something I really wanted to have in the system. Hopefully next year I'm coming out with a dual integrator as well, which will really then allow for complete analog computing patches. So just on that thought of like taking a signal that's moving, let's take a sound that's not just a constant drone. So one moment. Jesus. So I'm just going to use the tidal wave real quick as a VCO. You could use any VCO, of course. And let's just see if that's working first. Okay, so there's our clean VCO, and we're going to put that into the top of the multiplier. And then we're going to take another VCO and multiply it with that. Okay. And let's first see how that sounds. Yeah, that's so it works a lot better with stuff that's moving, because then the harmonics are going to be shifting more. And if you just put that, like, let's put it through the wow and flutter, give it a little delay. Jesus. So you can very quickly get some nice stuff. And then we could add a third signal. And you can use the two multipliers completely separately, but it's nice to have the feature where you can come out of the bottom one. So we're going to come out of the bottom, and we're going to add a third signal. We'll start with just an LFO. And then if you were to give a third signal another audio rate signal, or right now we're giving a sine wave as the modulator. If we gave it a saw, that's pretty nice. So the tremolo kind of sound is coming from one of them. And then the more ring mod stuff is coming from the other one. So, and then you could take the outputs from both and mix those together, and depending on what signals you have, you can get phase cancellation or other effects like that. But this is really just using it for audio effects. The DC stuff is more complicated, and honestly, I don't really want to do it right now. But I mean, the audio stuff is more like, ooh, it sounds nice, and it does sound really good. Like, because it's very high bandwidth multiplication, you can get some beautiful sidebands, and you can get stuff that, you know, when you listen to shortwave radio, and if you have a station that's going in and out, and the talking starts sounding metallic, that's the same type of stuff. You're getting sidebands. So you can, especially with vocal samples or anything like that, you can replicate a lot of that. And the classic frequency shifting really is just two multipliers, a quadrature oscillator, and a summing block. So you could patch a frequency shifter with this plus a quadrature oscillator and summing, or a mixer. So already within your system, you'd have one of the main blocks of a frequency shifter. But there's many other fun things you can do with it. It's just one of those models that I think is fun to experiment with, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. All right, so moving on. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But, you know, showing this effect is always the easiest thing, because no matter how much I say it can do this and that, people are like, it's a ring mod, right? And it's true, you can do ring mod stuff with it. Okay, so now I'm going to patch up something. We're going to take that same, actually, let's just take that sound, and we're going to look a bit at the Eternal Spring filter. And this filter is a weird filter. The topology is kind of strange because it's a two-pole self-oscillating filter that is not a state variable. Most two-pole filters that have been in synths throughout the years are either state variable Well, they're pretty much all state variable. If they are a cascade, it's pretty rare. I think Aries did one that was a cascading two-pole. But anyway, it's already the topology is weird, and then there's a lot of artificial saturation on the input and the output. You cannot get a clean signal out of it. It's not linear. Don't try. You won't get, you know, if you put a sawtooth in, you won't get a sawtooth out. It's not broken. And I even say in the manual, like, don't make this your only filter, because you'll be really upset. Like, it's not good at certain things. But because of that, it allowed me to sort of focus on a filter that's really good at other things. So let's see if we can hear it real quick. Okay. Okay. So and actually, for a minute, I just want to put a sine wave into it because I want you to hear what it does to a sine wave. Just give me 1 second. Really, it's very good at creating harmonics and at creating stuff that moves. It's not temperature compensated. So right off the bat, the Q will move a little bit. It's not unstable in the sense that it's going to like explode in volume. In fact, it's pretty tame. It's self-limited, but it is unstable in the sense that it's constantly moving around. And at certain settings, you can even hear chaotic noise inside of the Q. It does self-oscillate, but the self-oscillation is tuned to be quieter than the audio signal so that it can add weight to your signal, if that makes any sense. So this is a sine wave going into it. Yeah. So that's what we're putting into it sounds like this. After going through the filter, it sounds like this. So, as I said, it's not clean. And if we give it a little bit of LFO, whoa, god damn it. Okay, so I'm going to bring the cutoff down and put some LFO into the CVN. Let's make it a little slower. Squelchy nasal character to it. But we're at max Q right now, so it does not ever, even though it is self-oscillating, you can hear if I take out the audio, it's definitely self-oscillating. But when you have an audio signal coming into it, the self-oscillation is quiet enough that it mixes in. But even without any Q, it still is adding a lot of saturation to the signal. So honestly, I usually like to use it pre-VCA, so that you can completely max the Q, max the distortion, but then cut it off. It's really nice for acid lines. It's good for fucked up sounds. If you bring the drive control down, it actually becomes a bit noisier and more self-oscillation-ish. Like you hear more of the sine wave. Now if we put in something that has harmonics, so 1 second. So it does some nice rumbly stuff. I'm just going to put it into a VCA real quick. Actually, we'll just use the multiplier as a VCA, so you can see that works. Okay. try with a different VCO, like if we use David's VCO-B. It sounds pretty good with audio rate modulation as well, so let's put in a little audio rate. We'll use the drone bank. So that's that. That is that filter. Oh, and while we're using the VCO-B, the kitty eyes is always hard to explain, but one of the nice, fun things you can do with it is if we listen real quick to the oscillator patch we have, which is, well, it's not clean, but it's cleanish. If we now plug the output of the kitty eyes, which is a chaotic attractor module, if we plug that into the second, the VCO-B has a volt per octave in and an FM in. So if we plug in the output of the kitty eyes into the FM in of the oscillator, and we start mixing it in a bit, we can get some nice dirt to our signal. If you put it in linear mode, it's different than in exponential mode, but you can add just enough that it's distorting your signal in a way that moves over time. Okay, now back to the kick me. The kick me has two kick drum outputs. The one that we were hearing before, and then it has an output B, which is really just a sub bass. And I'll let you hear that for a second, and then I want to put it through the high gain. So that's the output of output B. And as you turn up, it only has one knob, the output B. It has a decay knob. You can hear it's lots of sub bass. But it's fun to put that through the high gain. So we're going to put that through there. Oops. And then once again, we're going to come out of the sum output. And that'll give us some nice kick fuzz that we can turn on. Now on the main channel of the kick drum, on output A, the kick me has a lot of ways that you can tune it. And it really was designed as a kick drum that you could use in a live context. You don't have to use it live, but it's meant to be tunable, or very tunable, so you can get a lot of different kicks out of it. Starting with like a really tiny, if we turn all the stuff down, you can get a very clicky, small kick. If you start turning up some of the knobs, like the damping and the tune, you can get a much bigger kick. If you start bringing up the decay knob, which is really an initial decay, you can thicken it up. And quite a few of the knobs are interactive with each other, so there's hundreds of ways that, or thousands of ways that you can tune it to dial in different sounds. which I find to be very nice in a live context because it's easy to, you know, mess around with it. If you turn on the clipping section, you get a whole new range of sounds. And it's not based on any other kick drum. It's not XOX based. So I think it's nice to use with other kick drums because it has its own color. So it works well with 909s and 808s and things like that. But it has a distinct sound. Now if we put that through the high gain, that can sound nice as well. And for some of you, that might be just what you're looking for. Okay, so that's the kick me. Let's talk a little bit about the kitty eyes. And the kitty eyes is, as I said, it's our new Chaos module. We also make the Dreamboat and the Chaos Brother. And if you don't know anything about it, Chaos is nice because it's non-periodic, but it's not completely random. It's not like white noise. It's not a signal that is just constantly different. If you look at a chaotic attractor on the scope, it's the same shape over and over, but it's always moving. And if you use it as a modulation source, that means that you get something that is constantly changing, but also has a distinct personality to it that can be very useful for certain things. At the very least, using chaotic noise as a start for percussion can be a different way to make drums than just using white noise. So for example, if we were to take the output of the kitty eyes and put it through a VCA, and then, so we'll need an envelope. Okay. And we're going to high pass filter the chaotic noise. That goes into the VCA. Okay. we'll just add one other drum sound for comparison, and we'll play with that a little bit. Okay, so right now, we're just enveloping it, or putting it through a VCA, and we're taking off a bit of the bass. Depending on how you do it, you can get stuff that kind of sounds like rim shots, cowbells, things like that. But it definitely has a distinct sound to it because the noise is always moving around. And you get two outputs from it, an X and a Y, and they have a slightly different sound because they're quadrature. Okay, so that's a very simple way to use the output of the kitty eyes. It's just using it as audio. That audio is also nice for FMing VCOs and things like that. But you can also use the source from it as information or as a signal to drive shift registers, sample and holds, or algorithmic-based microprocessor-driven modules, things that are looking for information. The i.r.l core has some patches like that, as do a lot of other, like that teletype thing that Mono makes. But it has a lot of, it's very high bandwidth signal is the only easy way to say it. You can also do some fun stuff with the fact that it has chaotic trigger outputs. So there's a trigger out that looks at the signal and then puts out pulses based on what's going on. So you can use that to drive envelopes. Let's Or if you gave it something with harmonics like a sine wave. And then we could modulate the sine wave with the output from the chaos at the same time. That's a perfect example of chaotic triggers. It's like you kind of feel like you get the pattern, and then you listen more and you don't get the pattern. So it has a weird like rhythm to it. It has a personality. But as soon as you think you've like figured it out, it'll do something else. But it's kind of like somewhat rhythmic. You can also push that signal by using an external CV. let's see. What could we use? Well, we'll just give it some triggers. So each time it's getting a trigger, it's like trying to match up with the grid, but then it gets off again. So you can do some fun things where you set up a sequencer. Like let's say you have the 4MS QCD or any of their divider modules that have a reset in. You could set up a grid, like your main song that's on a 4/4 pattern. But then you could send a trigger into any of our chaos modules that pushes the chaos to try and be on the grid. And then you could take that trigger out and reset your master clock with it. So you can get rhythms that are like on the beat and then mess up. Or you can just add a tiny bit to do weird shuffles and stuff like that. I personally think that chaotic triggers are the most interesting aspect of using chaos in the modular, because you can really hear the aliveness of the chaos, because this is not a simulation of chaos. These aren't, this isn't like a pretend version of it. It's actually an electrical system that tends towards chaos. It's a true strange attractor under the hood. And if you get a bunch of these together, like when I was testing the Dreamboat, I would have like 20 of them going at a time. It's really weird. It's like being surrounded by ant colonies. It's fun. But if you use them to drive events in your system, you're really hearing the playfulness or the way that it thinks. And it can be quite useful, especially for like hi-hat patterns or hand drums, things like that. So now if we had a regular drum behind that, let's see, what else do we have going on? It sounds like a real song. Can you hear how the chaos is kind of like, it's sort of staying on the beat, but then within the measures, it's like, where is it? It has that weird like, like it's not quite that funky when it's not being pushed. But you can play with it, you can set, different amounts of stuff. Or you can make it completely crazy. Okay, so that's some ways to use the kitty eyes. Let's see. We talked about. Well, first of all, does anybody have any questions at this point? It'll take, yeah, pretty much any trigger input. Like, you can use that TR09 thing. You can use most of the Roland, like, yes. The answer is yes. It should work with any trigger input.
The trigger length doesn't matter?
No, the trigger length does not matter, actually.
Is there sensitivity?
No, there is not. No, but it shouldn't matter because it's diode to ground, so it converts any gate into a trigger. But using the damp, no, there's not. You should be fine. Actually, it's interesting. We had to do a mod to it because I tested it with everything under the sun except the beat step. And the beat step puts out like super long gates for some reason. But even if you do, all you're changing is the volume, and it doesn't really shorten it that much at all. I've looked at it on a scope. You know, like the Roland stuff puts out like some ridiculously short. It's possible. Well, I don't know. It's possible in the firmware they updated, but I have the newest firmware, and you still, I don't know.
Is it the gate out or the trigger out?
It's the trigger out I'm talking about. The trigger out, it's super. If you look at it on a scope and you compare it to a regular trigger that you get from like the, yeah, exactly. It's so long. And yes, you're right. If you go into every hit of the trigger and turn it to 2 or 3. But that's horrible because if you're improvising and just putting in kicks, it doesn't default to 2 or 3. Now maybe they've changed this. I looked. Maybe you can figure it out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But no, but all I had to do, David, was just change the fact that I basically just had to put some cleanup circuitry that converts anything longer. Yeah, it's just built in now that anything that's longer than a certain amount gets converted to a shorter thing. So don't worry about it. It'll work fine. But but yes, the answer is yes. It should work with just about any trigger. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, well, the multiplier kind of, because I've run samples of acoustic stuff. The filter, no. The high gain, I've run piezo-based stuff, like using piezo triggers into it or microphones. The filter, I don't know. Like, what kind of stuff? Yeah, I'm sure the only question there would be whether or not it would be the right amplitude. If you brought it up to the right level, I'm sure it would sound interesting. You know, because as I said, it adds a lot of harmonics to it. I don't think there would be any issue with that. Actually, you can, like if you plug a phone into the high gain, it'll boost, I mean, it'll distort the hell out of it though. But it'll boost it up to a higher level, and then you could, well, let's find out. Let's see if we can put, now granted, an iPhone is really quiet, but you might be able to put that straight into the filter. I don't know if we can or not. Let's find out.
Through high gain, it should work.
Through high gain, it would definitely work, but I just want to see if it'll work straight through. Yeah, it does. Well, I don't know what the hell that is. That might just be buzzing. I don't know if that's really a song or not. So let's put that into the high gain first and see. Jesus. That might just be from the lights. Let's find out. Yeah, the dimmer circuits. Yeah, you never know. Let's first just hear it through the high gain. Let's see. Let me make sure I have some music playing. Oh, I know the problem. That we're using a mono cable and my jack is not. Yeah, see. Okay, so now we have some music coming through the high gain. It definitely will boost it to a high. Well, this is all messed up though. Okay, so then we can put that through the filter. Let's see what happens. But my jack is messed up, so. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the beat step. I like to use it. It just has long triggers. Be prepared for that. But it won't matter with my stuff. I hope that answers your question. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I know it sounds good with drums as well. I've tried drum. I mean, really, this block right here of the multiplier, high gain, kitty eyes, and filter, those four together, when you start patching them all together and pushing things, even without any signal, you can get some nice stuff. But if you put drums through it or bass or whatever, you can just really sculpt things in a way that isn't necessarily the standard synth sounds or the, what we're used to. It's not like mini Moog sounds, that's for sure. But it's more, like mixer feedback sounds or, whatever. Just the sound of static. But it's quite nice. I mean, I like to use them. I mean, I make some pretty normal music sometimes. And it's nice within that context to have some modules that'll really do something different than like a swept filter sound or, a sine wave. To just have something that you can then cut apart with VCAs and envelopes and mix in with other stuff. And the high gain was really the first of the ones that I made, and it was just the reaction to wanting something that I could trash stuff with. Because when you have signals that are plus and minus 5 volts, it's a lot harder to distort them because they're already so loud. So if you want to do something that's interesting without it just being pure square waves or just, a mess, I guess basically using a regular stomp box circuit like a fuzz face or something doesn't really work that well for plus and minus 5 volt signals. So I wanted something that could really distort things within a modular context. And I think it's good for that. I mean, it's also, I should show you real quick what it sounds like as a VCA or as a pair of VCAs. So if you give it an envelope signal, and once again, you probably wouldn't want it to be your only VCA because it's extremely nonlinear and dirty and incorrect, but there's a time and a place for that. So let's just put a signal into that and then come out of it. Okay, so we're going to just start by coming out of stage 1. And we're putting a sine wave in. Okay. And then we'll get something going with that. Oops. Damn it. that's just straight out of the VCO, no filtering or anything. And you can hear that it already has quite a bit of, you know, saturation to it just through one stage. And now if you come out of the second stage, and then the third stage. And then if you come out of sum, you hear all three at once. And there's a fun trick. When you come out of sum, stage 3 is inverted. So it causes phase cancellation, or cancellation of the signal. So depending on where you move the gain of stage 3, you can shift the DC point. You can do some really strange things to the waveform. And that's why it starts to get almost that pulse width modulated sound. So that's using the high gain as a VCA. What else, Jonas? What else?
Did you decide not to put a CV on the third channel?
Well, there is a third channel on the CV of the high gain. It's just not a true VCA. So there.
There's no attenuation on that one, right?
Oh no, there is. There's a knob on
The third channel?
Yeah, look, right here, CV3. It's channel 2.
Ah,
The knob is both the initial value and the CV.
thanks.
So you just turn it down for, there's a reason. But basically, I mean, the main reason is each of the 3 circuits is completely different. Stage 1 and 2 work like pretty normal VCAs as far as their operation goes. But stage 3 is neither linear enough nor, it just doesn't work like a VCA. It's more like a voltage controlled gain circuit or volume. Like you can boost it a bit, but it doesn't completely cut off. But it's meant more to work in conjunction with the other 2. And it works great feeding back into the first because it's inverted. That's the main reason it doesn't work well as a VCA, is that it responds upside down and is inverted. So it really shouldn't be used as a regular VCA because everything about it is wrong. But it works great sieving into the top section because it's backward, or it's upside down. Hold on, where's a stackable? Here's one. So that's why it's so easy to get feedback. So if you patch the bottom one into the top, it it goes to feedback right away because you're putting an inverted signal in. Basically, I thought it was more important to have it work as a system than to make sure that every single one works with VCA. You know what Okay, so that's a little more about the high gain. Any more questions?
Oh, I have a question.
What is it?
There was going to be a sixth module in the suite of 5 that you held up.
No, well, I didn't hold anything back. There's actually 5 more coming by Christmas time. They're just, I mean, yeah, but don't think about those yet.
Just buy these right now.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? It might get delayed. But, you know, I didn't have anything come out for like 2.5 years, so there's a lot of stuff I want to get out. But don't worry about any of that. And also, at some point in the future, you know, well, there's going to be, some of the older ones will be available again, because most of the old ones are now completely out of stock. So those will be, like the drone bank is available again, and soon the WoW and Flutter will be available again. But yeah, so don't ask about the other ones yet.
Did you already explain about the analog computing thing?
A little bit. I mean, really the true analog computing isn't going to happen until that dual integrator module is ready. Because then the integrators and the multipliers, because then you can just open up an old analog computing textbook and patch stuff. Which I know you're all in a huge rush to do. Jesus Christ. But like, this is the stuff I really want to have. So, you know. It's my company, goddammit. Anything else?
What did you think of that Slowdive show?
Oh, it was wonderful. I saw them twice that year. I flew to Chicago just to see them at Pitchfork Festival. They're great. What more can you say about them? They're great. You like them too? They're super. Well, I have some stickers. And Control sells all these modules. I don't know what else to say. Should I put these over on the shelf?
Throw them out.
Yeah, actually. Which kind would you like?